Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of South and West Plan panels. My name is Councillor Eileen Taylor and I will be chairing today's meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed on the City Council YouTube channels so the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. South and West Plan panels deal with applications from the south, northwest, and west of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all relevant information and from applicants, members of the public, council officers to help members of the panels to make their decisions. Could I now invite members to introduce themselves? I will start from my left.
Nigel Wren, Planning Officer.
John Booth, Highways.
Sharon Hamilton, representing Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Councillor Denise Reagan, Bermondsey and Richmond Hill Ward.
Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Neil Walsh, heading in Hyde Park.
Councillor Jordan Bowden, Roundhay Ward.
Daniel Imhoff, part of the Plans Panel team.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Trish Smith, Pudsey Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Colin Campbell.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adelaide Wharfdale Ward.
Hello, everyone. Natasha Prosser, Clerk to the panel. Nicky Dio, Legal Advisor to the panel today.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Steve Butler, Group Manager for South and West Plans Panel Lead Officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I also welcome members of the public who are sitting in the audience today? So should we move on to item 1?
Thanks, Chair. There's no appeals against refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there's no exempt items. Agenda item 3, there's no formal late items. Agenda item 4, can members declare any interest? No. Agenda item 5, apologies from councillors Hasselwood and Finnegan. And over to you, Chair.
Thanks. We'll now move on to item 6, minutes of the last meeting held on September the 29th. I take it members have read the minutes, so could I have agreed the minutes? Yeah. Councillor Walsh, could someone second? I have 2 seconds. Are there any matters arising from the minutes? And no, you move it. Are there anything? Everything's okay, thank you. We'll go straight on to item 7, Guiseley School Field Roads in Guiseley. So could I hand over to the officer to present this?
Thank you, Chair. So this is a full planning application for a 2.4 high metre fence and gates at Guiseley School to enclose its playing fields, and it follows a site visit with members this morning. Just in terms of updates, I'm aware that panel members have received an email from councillors Alderson and Wadsworth. It is a late objection, and I'd just like to paraphrase that if I may. They say, as ward councillors for Guiseley and the Rawdon ward, we wish to register our formal objection to this proposal. This open area of land has been seen and used by the local community for many years and is one of the few truly open spaces in the area for some distance. As such, it allows local residents to access the site and partake in activities not really practical in enclosed gardens, such as walking or jogging. It does go on then to say that the application before panel is actually one of a pair of separate but intrinsically linked applications. The other application being for a new 3G pitch and floodlighting with new emergency access and the relocation of long jumps and associated landscaping work, which is not yet ready for consideration. Therefore, to consider this application alone would be premature. Both members then go on to comment on the advertisement of both this application and the aforementioned application, and say that they are concerned in the way in which that exercise has been carried out, and that the community may be underrepresented in this instance. And we would recommend to panel that the application is deferred until the tandem application on the site is ready for consideration, and the two can be considered holistically as one site. And finally, the note goes on to say that our previous comment for deferral stands, but if it is imperative that the application has to be determined today, we respectfully request and ask that the gates remain open when the school is not sitting, e.g. at evenings and weekends, to allow the community to use the site, and this be set by planning condition from the panel. As I say, that's the comments received from Councillor Wadsworth and Councillor Alderson, sorry. So I will comment on those issues raised as we go through this presentation. But in relation to the pending application, which is obviously for 3G pitch with floodlighting, this is a separate application. It's entirely a separate matter, and it's one which will obviously be considered in the fullness of time. And like any other application, it will be determined on its own individual planning merits. Both this application before you today and the application I've just mentioned for the 3G pitch has been advertised in accordance with planning procedures. So, as I say, this application is for fencing, perimeter fencing at Guiseley School. In terms of the need for the development, the applicant has submitted a supporting statement, and in this statement, reference is made to various safeguarding issues and the duty of care that the school has to protect its pupils. In addition, wider health and safety matters are also raised, and the fact that funding for the proposed fencing has only recently been approved following several earlier unsuccessful bids. So that's the context for this application. I'm just turning to the slides. Okay, so the application site is edged in red. The kind of inset line, if you like, the purple coloured boundary is the alignment of the proposed fencing. And as you can see, there is a standoff distance between the two. And I'll come on to that and explain the reasons behind that in a moment. But effectively, it's to protect and preserve existing tree cover and vegetation. So the proposed alignment of the fence doesn't interfere with existing kind of landscaping and greenery. So just in terms of the geography, the site is positioned in the urban area of Guiseley. The school itself is just to the southeast of the screen as we look at it. Just trying to get the pointer to work, actually. Yeah, I'll try and describe it as we go through that. To the south of the site is Fieldhead Drive. To the west of the site is Bradford Road, and that forms the boundary of the conservation area, which is referenced in your report. To the east of the site is Alderside Way and Alderside Road. Separating the school site from the application site is a public footpath, which is on the southeastern kind of boundary as we look at it. And that links Fieldhead Drive to Alderside Road and ultimately onto Back Lane itself. Are we? Unfortunately, this image is not that clear, but it does show the reason why the red line is inset, because what you can see on this is all the existing trees and their root protection areas, which, as I say, the fence line has been designed to accommodate those and to ensure that there is no removal or tree loss as part of this application process. And the inset that you can see on the western boundary here means that the fence line's inset by approximately 2.5 to 3 meters. And that allows a margin there for landscaping and tree planting should that be necessary to help integrate the fencing into the landscape. And similarly, on the eastern boundary of the site, the standoff distance is between 6 and 7 meters to residential properties, again to safeguard existing tree cover and vegetation, but equally sufficient distance away from housing so it doesn't cause any kind of visual harm in that regard. And in terms of the overall solution, well, it's pretty standard design solution, well mesh fencing, 2.4 meters high. It's what you tend to see around most school sites. It's a DFE standard requirement. Green powder coated. The width between the posts on site will be approximately 2.5 meters. So the panel widths, you know, these kind of solutions are found in most urban areas, greenbelt settings and conservation areas alike. So it's a kind of an accepted solution. And as I say, pretty common on school sites across the country and across Leeds. Just in terms of the aerial image, then clearly the site's laid out as plain fields at the moment, used by Guiseley School. As we look at it, the school itself is positioned, although it's been redeveloped now, to the southeast of that image. This is the can't get the pointer to work. That one's working now, is it?
And breaks, they'll be in between breaks. Fix that one. Yeah, just in case. Is it not that one?
Okay. So this is the footpath that I mentioned from Fieldhead Drive, linking onto Alderside Road and then ultimately onto Back Lane. And that footpath is unaffected by the proposal. There is no proposal to divert that or to close it. So that will remain publicly accessible. Just in terms of some of the images, this is a view from the south of the site from Fieldhead Drive. I think one of the key features here, one of the key characteristics is the sorry about it, is the edge line that exists at the moment, the Hawthorn edge. It's quite a substantial feature, probably over 2 meters in height. And from that kind of aspect, you wouldn't see the fencing, which would sit directly behind it, because it's going to be retained as part of this proposal. This is a view again from the south of the site, this time on the inside of that edge line I've just described, facing west. And the other feature that you can see there in the background is this stone wall, which is to remain again in situ. It's unaffected by the proposal. There is quite a difference in land levels between Bradford Road and the playing fields. So the visual impact of the fence would be negligible in that respect.
That one.
Okay, so this is a view of the existing public footpath, which I've described earlier. So this is effectively looking facing northeast. As we look at it, the fence line would be on the left-hand side of the footpath. So along this line here, essentially. And this is a view looking now southwest. So the fence line would be now on the right-hand side as we look at it. So on this line here, as I say, unaffected by the scheme, and public access would be basically a continuation of what the arrangement is at the moment. This is a view from the edge of the conservation area, so to the west of the site, but this time facing east. This is the existing stone wall, an existing access which will be retained and used as part of access into the playing fields. And then a view from the access point that I've just described, looking back towards the southern boundary. And I guess the key thing to take from this one is the difference in levels, which I described earlier, compared to Bradford Road, which is obviously much higher, and the fence line, which is going to be set inset within the site, would be substantially lower than that section of Bradford Road, and therefore you'd only see basically the top tier of that fence. And I would estimate, even though there are changing land levels, that you would never see more than 400 millimeters at the top of that kind of fence height. This is a view facing east. So these are properties on Alderside Road, Alderside Way. And again, from that, you can see the existing kind of boundary treatment that exists along that and acts as a green buffer. But equally, as I mentioned also, the fence line would not be positioned directly on the boundary. It would be inset between 6 and 7 meters. So again, a reasonable standoff distance in that respect. This is a view facing north, which is fairly open in nature. And you would only see the fence line effectively from long distance views. And this is just an example of the existing signage on the Guiseley School field, which kind of makes it clear that the fields are owned by Guiseley School and that they are used as school playing fields. Yeah. In terms of just some kind of computer generated images, this is a view from Bradford Road facing east. And in terms of the height of the fence line, you can just see. Sorry. You can just see the top edge of the fence. As I say, it's fairly minimal. Visually, the fence would have no material impact. It is something which can be easily accommodated into the landscape. And similarly, this is a view from Fieldhead Drive. And I think the hedge has grown since the CGI was done, because you can now see the top of the fence. But in reality, as we could see this morning on site, the height of the hedge is higher than the majority of the fence line as we walked along Fieldhead Drive. But again, even if you accept that as a visualization, the visual impact is extremely limited. So that kind of concludes all those slides, Chair. Just in terms of site's land use allocation, the site is allocated as green space in the site allocations plan with a typology of outdoor sports. And this is consistent with the site's UDP allocation, which is also applicable in this instance and designated as protected playing pitches. And that would be N6 in terms of the UDP allocation, and consistent with many school sites across the city. The report itself sets out the policy position in this regard, and the enclosure of the land does not conflict with these planning policies, and there is no material change of use of the land involved. And I think it's also worth noting that there is an existing community use agreement on the school site, and that related to the redevelopment of the school back in 2019. And that planning condition to relate to community use was approved and agreed, and that remains in force and would be unaffected by this proposal as well. So whilst the land is enclosed, it would still be accessible to the community. And I think that concludes my presentation, Chair. And the application will be, well, is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the report.
Thank you. We've got one speaker and against the application. Chris, could you please? Thank you, Chris. You've got 4 minutes to present your comment.
Thank you, and thank you for the time today. So my name's Chris Shaw, and I'm a resident of Alderside Road, and I'm here speaking on behalf of other residents and people from further afield. So we believe that this application contravenes the National Planning Policy Framework, particularly Section 14, meeting the challenge of climate change and flooding. And this is because, firstly, the application site is situated in a location containing high surface water flood risks, and there's also current records of recent flooding within properties in the adjacent area. There appears to be a known flood risk, such as, for example, culverts at capacity, and that was in June this year, which requires specific mitigation and would impact on this development. We also believe that this planning process is regrettably not. We don't believe it's that this planning process are the interrelated one. I know that they're getting treated separately, but we believe actually they are interrelated. For the AGP pitch have been undertaken in an open and honest manner, and that goes against the values of the council. The planning team has been shown to be highly selective or even discriminatory against its handling of what the elected officers have requested, what the local community have looked at, and resident contributions from people like myself. And this has been at every level, right from the chief planning officer and downwards. We've made a number of formal complaints to the council, including to the monitoring and Section 151 officers. The first one of these is around outstanding environmental information requests. So these are requests that are known, but currently withheld for geotechnical reports, historic flood risk mitigations, and legal clarity of liability for the existing flood risk and the disrepair of the flood assets that should be maintained by the council. We also are looking at complaints around improper legal planning and democratic process. We know there's evidence that's been provided about how the planning team has at all levels misrepresented the elected officers and their contributions, treated political party councils.
Chris, sorry, could I just draw your attention?
Yeah.
We are talking about the fence. I would like to hear the reason why you don't want the fence, or you want the fence, not what the officers. We are not here to discuss the officers today.
Yeah.
Whatever
right.
issue you have with the officers, you can take that outside of this meeting. But let's talk about the fence, yeah?
Okay, so really what I was trying to say, the process has not been correct for getting this fence put forward. So if I move on to the final bit then, on this area, one of the reasons for not putting the fence in is that the flood risk in the area, and there should be no actual development on there until that risk has been properly assessed, and we don't believe that's the case. And an example of that, the estate Alderside estate has got 7 high road risk homes and 14 medium flood risk homes, and we believe that this has not been taken into account by both planning and the local flooding agency as well. So for that reason, we think that this application itself contravenes the National Planning Policy Framework, and it would be procedural impropriety for the council to actually make a decision without first determining the actual risk and what that is. The next area that we were looking at is very similar to what Mr. Wren down there was talking about earlier, what the other councillors have been talking about the community use, how it's been used. And I've lived in the area for 25 years. It's always been accessible to the community. Historically, that's been ongoing for well over 50 years since the land was made into what it is today. And that's used heavily by people to do running, jogging, walking, lots of different activities, children, sledging, you name it, it goes on. And that's not just the community, it's actually people at the school, outside of the school as well, that use that. And we've worked out it'll roughly remove about 7,300 hours of access for the community by fencing it off and not giving us access anymore. And we believe that'll be detrimental to the well-being and
thank you, Chris. Time's up. Okay. Chris, you've made a few comments which I'm going to not elaborate, but just to talk about the flood risk. Are you trying to say the fence would the fence wouldn't prevent a flood? Because we know when flood do happen, it would wash anything.
Yeah, I agree. The fence itself wouldn't do a flood, but the land does flood, and it will also it'll be detrimental to the upkeep and the repair of the culverts and everything that's in that area, and that's the responsibility of the council, and that doesn't seem to have been taken into consideration, in our opinion.
I do think it take into consideration, and if the flood do happen, it will be up to the school to rectify it, and it will be their finance. But the officers that just represent the application highlighted that the community use will still there. So I'll just go over to members if members have any question to ask. Councillor Anderson.
Just if you can clarify the community use that's there just now. Are you saying that the community use the fields whilst the school is operating on that land at the same time? So that when the school are having sports, are there community people using that at the same time or not? And then I've got another one after that.
No, I'm not suggesting that the school don't use it in the way that they use it. The community use it at weekends, at evenings, certainly in the summer. I mean, the school put a running pitch on there. People use that for their own exercise. So it's outside of the school hours.
The follow-up to that is the suggestion that was made by two of your ward members that we heard earlier on is, if this application was to be approved today, would you be happy if we said that it needs to be open to the public at non-school hours? Is that something that, whilst I accept you don't want it, but if it has to be there, is that something you think would be good?
Can I just draw your attention? The officer just says the community can use the pitch. It's still in place for them to use.
That's not what my question's about. That's not what my question's about.
But either if the fence is open or shut, they can still use it, Councillor Anderson. It's there for them. So there'll be ways arranged for them to use it if they can use it.
No, if it's being used, if the fence is being used to safeguard pupils, that means you can't allow people just to willy-nilly come in and go as they please, right? So what I'm asking for is, once the school day is over and once it's not being used for sports events by the school at a weekend for any sporting activity, would the community be happy that that would still enable them to use the site? That's all. I'm not trying to have an argument. I'm just trying to help get some clarity on this. That's all I'm trying to do. It's just, I mean, would that help you if you were given certain hours of open access to it?
Yes, it would. But also there's other mitigations that I didn't get time to speak about, like the view that people will get. It will obstruct. Certainly one of the houses, it will obstruct completely. So there is other mitigations, but that would be one mitigation that we would welcome, yes.
Chair, could I just pop in one?
You can, yeah.
Just to mention that rights to views are not a material planning consideration. So they're not something that members can take into account, and nobody has got a legal right to a view, and it's not a material legal consideration for planning.
Bring the officer back in to clarify the use of public.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, who wants to come in? Steve of the agreement. Let's Steve.
Sorry, I think there's a slight confusion, wasn't there? I think what Councillor Anderson was suggesting, that the fence was left open to allow access on an evening and weekends. Is that, yeah. Which then actually negates the point of having a fence in the first place, I think. But what I just want to clarify, there is an existing community use agreement, which I've got here, which is fairly standard in that the times for that, although restricted because it's a community use agreement, you wouldn't have the direct access that you have now. But that's the whole point of the fence, obviously, because of the issues the school think they have. But here we've got Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. to 10, Saturday 8:30 a.m. sorry, to 1800, Sunday 900 to 16, and then school holidays it's a little bit similar but slightly extended at 8:30 to 22. Monday to Friday, Saturday 8:30 to 1800, sorry, and Sunday 9 o'clock in the morning to 1600. And of course, it works a little bit like the way the Coburn one was that we discussed a few weeks ago, in terms of that it's run through the City Council's letting, and the school then have direct control over who they let onto it.
application that we had before us the last time, we got clarity on that particular point as well.
Councillor Anderson, but you were asking Chris if he would accept it. You could ask that question to the officer to clarify it for you. He could not clarify it. You wanted it to know. You wanted to know if the gate left open.
I disagree with that. I'm asking, at the moment, we have got a number of residents who are objecting to this fence. And I am trying to find a way forward that we can put in place some measures that would mitigate against some of their concerns, not all of them, but mitigate. Our job is to improve an application, not just to take it blindly and say, black and white, yes or no. Our job is to come up with constructive suggestions as to how it could be improved. And that's all I was trying to do there, not do anything else.
Can I?
Chair, sorry, just for clarification, obviously the school and their representative will be speaking shortly, so you can ask about that. But from what I understand, because of the potential threat from the unrestricted access in terms of dog walkers, etc., and damage and on some occasions needles and individuals, the school would not want to open the gates afterwards, because if they did that, what would be the point of having the fence in the first place?
Did you want to say something?
No, it's fine. Thank you, Chair.
To speak in favor of the application, we've got Maria and Paul.
Members, can I just make one point? There's been members from the public that a gentleman has sought to speak and ask a question. Clearly, you're aware that in order to speak and address members for a planning application, they must register their desire to do so. I just wanted to draw your attention that I told him that he's not able to speak.
Okay, Mary and is it now Paul? You've got 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair members. The proposed playing fields fencing and associated maintenance gates at Guiseley School will be 2.4 metre high, visually permeable green weld mesh, a standard material used at school sites. The height of the fencing is dictated by Department for Education standard that requires secure line fences at state schools to be minimum of 2.4 metre high. The location of the fence has been carefully considered, taking into account the existing trees and shrubs, including the root protection areas. For clarity, no vegetation will be removed to facilitate the proposal. Furthermore, additional planting will be provided between the existing dry stone wall and the new fence along Bradford Road. Due to the current lack of perimeter fencing, the access to the playing fields is unrestricted, and having regard to some comments submitted by the local community, it appears that some view the playing fields as public open space and therefore believe it should remain open. However, as outlined in the officer's report, Guiseley playing fields perform a function as private playing fields used for the purposes of the school and are not designated as public open space. Notwithstanding that, the area can be used by the local community via approved community use agreement at times that this area is not used by the local community, by the school. Given the primary use of the site as playing fields, this application aims to improve safeguarding measures at Guiseley School, where pupils are using the playing fields during PE lessons or during extracurricular activities. The restriction of access to the general public and security of the children are vital to good safeguarding procedures, which protect the safety of both students and staff. To reiterate conclusions of the officer's report, the proposed development is considered to be acceptable in wider planning terms and lies within an area of sufficient size to accommodate such proposals. without having a detrimental impact upon the visual or residential amenity of the area or its general character. I would now like to pass it over to Paul Clayton, a head teacher at Guiseley School. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Maria, Chair, members. The governing body of Guiseley School have taken the decision, in order to mitigate against ongoing safeguarding risks, to seek permission on behalf of the ALPT, the Airborough Learning Partnership Trust, to erect a perimeter fence around the school playing fields. The safeguarding issues of unsecured playing fields include, but are not limited to, the potential for intruders to access the site, an issue that has occurred 3 times in the last 2 years. The potential for physical industry due to litter, most commonly broken glass and aluminium cans. An increasingly common issue of dogs being walked on the field untethered during the school day, and the removal of dog feces by PE staff now becoming a regular occurrence. Furthermore, like all secondary schools, Guiseley School is now more commonly required to offer places to students who require perimeter fencing as part of their educational healthcare plan. In addition to these sort of safeguarding risks, a number of issues such as field overuse, litter and vandalism make it impossible to keep the fields in a condition conducive to the effective delivery of a modern PE curriculum. Keeping children safe in education, the document which outlines the actions schools must take to safeguard children, defines a key part of safeguarding as taking action to enable all children to have the best outcomes. This planning application is therefore also pertinent to that element of safeguarding for our young people. A successful bid for DfE funded block replacement programme at the school has now made the funding of this perimeter fencing a possibility. Capital expenditure previously used to maintain dilapidated buildings is now used for development projects in the school, hence the application being brought at this time. The issue has become more pressing for the school in recent months. The school mitigates against the current risks through additional staffing, both in teaching and associate staff. Real-term funding reductions mean the school is unable to continue to mitigate against these risks in this way.
Thank you. Does any members have any question? Councillor Campbell?
Couple of questions. The first one relates to what I think is a parallel application that you've got in the pipeline relating to a 3G pitch. And I suppose the question—
Councillor Campbell, please, I would like to discuss the fence today. I don't want to go any further with 3D. That's not in front of us. That application will come to us at some point, and I'm afraid today we are just on the fence. The officers make it clear.
Well, I'm sorry, but it appears I'm not allowed to ask you a question.
Ask question, Councillor Campbell, but not on a 3D page,
Chair,
on the fence.
Chair, it is not unreasonable for members to ask questions to gain information about an application. You are telling me I am not allowed to do that. No. Now, yes, you did, Chair. Yes, you did. I'm sorry, but I think you did.
I did not.
Now, it is not unreasonable.
We are not speaking about an application, what's not in front of us. We are speaking of the application, what's in front of us. You can ask as many questions you want on the application today, but not what to come or what. I didn't say not to ask a question.
Sorry, Chair, could I assist? Councillor Campbell, just as you're aware, you're fully aware, in relation to the public speaking protocol, there is a requirement that when members ask questions, it's for questions arising out of the points that they've made relevant to the application that's being determined. So I just wanted to make that point.
Well, true, and I understand that, having been on the panel a long time. But I think it's fair to say that if you'd let me finish, I might have got to that point. But there you are. But if I'm not allowed to finish, I'm not allowed to finish.
Any more question to Trish? No, sorry, Trish first.
Thank you, Chair. So we've heard about the upset that this is going to cause in the community and the perceived lack of community use of the facilities, albeit we understand that they do belong to the school and the community were using it with without your blessing almost. From what I've heard, we can't put the fence in and then open it up for community use evenings and weekends. So was there any thought to moving the fence further in, so leaving a larger perimeter space around to enable walking, jogging, dog walking, that kind of thing? So it wasn't taking place on your school grounds, but it was still a facility available to the community who have been using it for many years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say I'm fully cognizant of the upset that this has caused for our neighbours. And it's in no way the school's design to cause that upset. We need to do what is in the best interest of our young people. In terms of that, we did look at that. The problem that we've got with that is that when you have school playing fields and pitches, you need a particular runoff space for the young people that sits outside of the pitches themselves. And this fence actually probably sits within that runoff space. So it's as tightly into the pitches and away from the perimeter as it can be.
So would you perceive any difficulty in the community using the space in between the hedges and walls and the fence? Because obviously the fence is moved in. So would they be able to use that external space, please?
So whilst that would not cause us an issue in terms of the safeguarding issues and concerns, because we wouldn't expect our students to use that space, the problem it would give the school, and something that we would have to think very carefully about, would be the public liability whilst they were on that land. So we're inviting people onto that land, which is privately held, who holds the responsibility if there is any injury or issue caused whilst they're using it.
And this.
Although you didn't refer this directly, it does fall to yourself. The officer explained to us that the application had been advertised correctly based on Leeds City Council's procedures. But as you're aware, because you've dealt with a number of these applications throughout the city, what additional consultation did you do with the local community? I mean, for example, did the school send a letter home to every parent explaining what was going to happen? Did your consultants do a letter drop or a leaflet drop in the wider area to bring it to people's attention? We accept, or at least I accept, that the council have confirmed that they've done everything correct from their point of view. But again, the council officers, I would have thought, would have advised you that it would help your case if you consulted more widely and got local buy-in. So what did you do to try and get local buy-in? Because before us today, we have concerns by residents that they haven't been properly consulted.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have consulted the local community in line with the council statement of community involvement. We didn't actually have to do it, but we thought it's just the right thing to do. So we have distributed flyers to all properties that overlook the fields. And a little bit more. I personally produced a flyer. In addition to this, I visited the school site twice and spoken to the school governors about this. One of the governors represented, I understand, residents that their back garden backs onto the fields. So I had a conversation with the governor about our plans. Given the nature of the proposals and the scale of the proposals, we evaluated with together with the school, and this seemed as the most appropriate level of public consultation. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not okay.
Okay.
I've got two different bits of information. I've got what the residents have said. To that, as you're aware, when your extension to the school was going forward, there was a number of objections from the local community. As a result of the number of objections you got there, did you not think it would have been better to have consulted more widely and got buy-in, which we who were on the committee in 2019 had, met with some of the residents in the area who objected to your extension. Now, when we were on site today, the extension was brilliantly built. No complaints about that. But you must have been aware that there was ill feeling at the time.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm very well aware of the objections because I was the company I work for was the agent for the expansion of the school, and I actually have a relationship with residents living around the school. That's why we distributed the flyer. The limitations of funding, obviously, for everything. And like I said, we assessed the situation and we thought that printing X amount of flyers and distributing to all houses that can actually see playing fields and will be able to see the fence was appropriate. And because of the objections during the refurbishment of the school, that's why we took our time and met with governors who represent them as well to make sure that everything is done properly. And we discussed the proposals. I personally, professionally think that what we've done as part of the local consultation was appropriate. Of course, I would like to say that given the planning process is democratic process, local residents also been given opportunity to comment on a planning application where it was advertised at public access. So overall, I think that that was appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. My question.
Sorry.
Can I just remind member of the public, you are not allowed to speak. And Chris, you already have your opportunity, to speak. Oh, but members of the public not allowed to speak. Sorry. My question is regarding the hawthorn hedge. Have you considered double fence, putting a double edge there rather than fencing it? Did you think about doing that? And the wall, why do you need the wall is a fence already there that you have to stand to look over? Why have you considered putting a higher fence?
Okay, so the reason for looking to erect a 2.4 metre high fence is because that's what conforms to the Department for Education standards and expectations around perimeter fencing for safeguarding in schools. And that's why we also didn't consider just enlarging or doubling up on the fence that we had, or rather the hedge rather, but that a fence would be the most appropriate solution.
Thank you. Any other question? Thank you, Marion Paul. Yeah. Are there any questions to the officers? Councillor Campbell, go for it.
With your permission, Chair.
Definitely.
Mr. Wren, could you tell us if there are currently any planning applications within the system that might be affected by this development?
There are no applications which would affect the determination of this application, Councillor Campbell. There is a pending application which you are aware of, but it's unrelated to considering that today.
This unrelated application, for the benefit of to get clear in my mind, is it within the site enclosed by this fence?
That application, Councillor Campbell, is within the red line boundary of this site, yes.
Councillor Anderson.
Go first.
Okay.
Can I ask, as far as you're aware, if there are any imperative reasons why a decision should be made today and could not be delayed for, say, a longer period for more information? Are there any specific reasons why a decision has to be made today, i.e. if we don't do it, they won't get the funding?
Well, this application is ready for determination, councillor. It's been advertised in the correct manner. You know, it's only reasonable and fair that if an application is due to be determined and, you know, the request has been made for it to be considered at plans panel, it's been brought to this panel for consideration. It's only right and proper that it is obviously considered and considered on its own individual merit. I suspect the longer you leave this, then, you know, if there are safeguarding issues which have been identified and raised by the school, it would be remiss not to deal with that in an efficient way.
Dave, who want to comment?
Chair, we keep going back to this issue of the 3G pitch. Yes, there is a separate application that's been consideration by the council, but actually this application and that application are mutually exclusive. The determination of one is not bound or associated at all with the other one. We, as planning office, are duty bound to bring applications forward at the earliest opportunity for determination. This application is ready for determination. It is not affected, despite what might have been said in the letter by Councillor Wadsworth and Alderson, and it is not connected at all to the other application. Either, if approved, could be built without any association with the other. Thank you, Chair.
Did you want to say something?
I was just going to amplify on the point that we've got a statutory requirement to determine applications when they are ready, and this application is now ready and entirely exclusive of the other application that's been mentioned.
Councillor Anderson.
As you are aware, when we were on site today, and Councillor Hamilton's already hinted at it, we looked at the security as is at the moment in terms of the hedge, and you've emphasised that very clearly in your presentation to us, the immense height. And you also commented that although the fence was going to be seen on the drawings that you showed, you accepted that the hedge was already higher than that, and so the visual amenity was going to be even less than you'd emphasised, and that was very clear. And on site, you heard a number of members asking the question why we couldn't, in terms of keeping us within the climate change requirements that we've got, by planting more hedging around the area, which would stop anything. There's also a wooden fence already wound into the hedgerow that's there already. So there is already a buffer and makes it very difficult to get through. We also saw some thorns as well. So the permeability, unless people want to get ripped to shreds, is going to be, you know, it was already there in terms of the security of it. At any time, did anybody discuss with the applicants about potentially having the fence at the bottom end as you come from the school itself, so that when you come down the slope that we came and you took us onto the path, that part's fine, no problems at all whatsoever with having a fence along there, and no problem having a fence along the part where it shares it with the next door primary school. No questions, no problems with that at all. But one side backs on to households, so the houses have got fencing there, and that's the side that this next application that we're not looking at today. And in terms of the security and any potential, by planting more at that side, might, and this is where I'm in, mitigate against some of the issues that might come forward in the subsequent one, because you would have higher planting, trees being planted, hedges being planted, which would potentially help. Was that ever considered? Because we've heard the applicant saying that this is what the education department say, but we know that every school in the city does not comply with that whatsoever. There are Hinds 57 varieties. I mean, to give you an example of that, in my own ward at Ralph Thorsby, they do have the gates open and people regularly go in after hours with that one. That's no problem at all. So we, as a council, permit that at Ralph Thorsby School. So was that ever discussed? And is there any reason why we cannot have the fencing as specified in here down the bottom end where you accessed, and also the bit that separates the primary school, and the rest, the wall is sufficient in my view, at that point, and also the hedging down there as well. Is there any reason why that we cannot have just partial fencing on those two locations?
Thank you, councillor. I think the key to this is that the school require a secure perimeter boundary, and where you have situations where there are existing gaps, and I take your point about planting up in those gaps, but you need a barrier, I feel, which is quite substantial, and the 2.4 metre fence is the standard requirement which the DFE recommend. I think if it's hidden behind an edge, as it is in this case, then you wouldn't see it anyway. So what harm does it actually cause? And I suspect that it's very minimal in terms of its visual impact, and indeed its visual impact upon the setting of the adjacent conservation area, because it is inset, as I've described in the introduction. There is an opportunity along that margin, along the western flank of the site, to infill that with some additional planting.
That's my point, that I understood that the hedge was at least partially, if not totally, responsibility of the school. When we were on site today, I asked the question, and there were gaps already in that hedge. And in my personal view, in order to mitigate, again, to any potential drainage issues, that if we plant more trees, plant more greenery, plant more hedgerow, it will make the site drier in terms of. So I'm just, it's to meet the, we've got the climate emergency requirements that we're putting in, and we should be looking at applications and where the council have got some responsibility to try and put in as many mitigation measures. And by planting more hedgerow, by planting additional trees, we would be meeting that side of the obligation, and also at the same time safeguarding access to the pitches for the safety of pupils, in my personal opinion.
Thank you, councillor. And I think that's what actually has been recommended. We have imposed a landscaping, or suggesting a landscaping condition is attached to any planning approval. So that would create the opportunity to create, as I say, a stronger buffer, more trees and more hedging to fill those gaps that you've alluded to.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. It was just that when we move to comments, can I just be in the queue, as it were?
Councillor Giovanni.
Same with myself, yeah.
Sorry, Chair. Can I ask a question in relation to the reference to the DFE standard? Is it actually a standard, or is it a recommendation? So if I came along to the DFE and said, I have a school here with an empty playing field, what would you suggest we do? And they would say, well, the best thing's a two metre high fence. Now, if I said to you, but there's already a 2 metre high wall, are they saying there should be two? Or aren't you sure? Like any of us are, I suppose.
Well, I think the underlying kind of consideration would be to protect the pupils of that school, wouldn't it? To have a secure perimeter. And, you know, it is a recommendation. It is a recommendation. Well, the 2.4 metre is the standard recommendation, and it's what you see across the city and indeed across the country. And this is a standard solution, and that's found in the green belts, as I said earlier, in urban areas and in conservation settings.
Yeah, just to jump in as well. I mean, answering it succinctly, it's the recommended standard. It's as simple as that. From the DFE is that fence. But as any of us around here who can think back far enough of being a child, ever actually gone through a hedge? Because they are permeable, even if they're made out of hawthorn, hedges are permeable. Yeah. Bits get broken down.
I think, Chair, can I just stop me talking about something that we weren't talking about? I simply asked a question about the DFE standard. I didn't ask a question about what Mr. Butler did in his youth, entertaining though it is. You know, You can climb over a fence, quite frankly. Let's be realistic. Nothing's impermeable. If it was, nobody'd ever break out of jail.
Yeah, but sorry, Chair, just to finish, the other thing I was going to make is, anybody ever actually seen a dog go through a hedge too? They don't generally climb over. They don't generally climb over fences.
Through fences as well. So it's not.
The point I'm trying to make is, it's a recommended standard to safeguard children at a school and to prevent objects that you wouldn't necessarily want on a school playing field to be there, whether that be borne by dogs or cans or bottles or whatever. So the answer is very simple, isn't it? It is the recommended standard, and it is throughout the whole of the city. And what I was trying to answer was the question about the hedge. The hedge is not really will not achieve the level of security that's required, even if it's planted quite thickly.
Members do read from page 12. You see the outline of what's happening on the field at the moment. And that's a terrible thing for young people. And it's for prevention as well. So it's all combined together. So we need to take things into consideration. We have a duty of care for our young people at schools. We have a duty of care for the community. At the same time, there is, how many times have we seen it on the telly? And only if we did take precaution. The school are trying to take precaution. So why put the fence halfway and leave it open to continue with what's happening on page 12? I'll now move on to comments. Councillor Walsh. Oh, sorry, Trish.
Sorry, Chair, I did have a question. So I have no problem with the fence for the safeguarding reasons. I do believe that we need to keep our young people safe, but I do believe we need to be fair and responsible to the wider community as well. In other parts of the city, school playing fields are left open evenings and weekends, and I know there's a community use in place, a community use order in place at this school, but like this morning when we went, it was raining, and it's half term, so the children would be inside, but then it dried up. So this afternoon, the children might want to go and play on those fields. So I would suggest, if there was any way possible of having those fields open evenings and weekends, just for community use. And I understand that some of the problems that the school have been encountering have been to do with littering and dog fouling and things like that. But I didn't see a waste bin anywhere near. So if it were the case, could it be that we put some waste bins there and at least trialed it, so that the community, if they used it respectfully, could continue to use it evenings and weekends? But if the problems continued, then obviously it would be revisited.
To you, what I said this morning, Councillor Smith, if I have my back garden and allow you to walk in it at any time, and there's a time when I feel it's not appropriate and I need security, then I would put security in. I'm sure the school not doing it likely to exclude the community. I don't think they are. But I think the school have the young people interest at heart. Why paid for a fence to prevent all these issues and leave it open to carry on again? So I'm not going to take any more questions. I'm going to go on to comment. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent set of discussions this afternoon on this one item. As a recovering former plans chair, I have a theory that no matter what the first item is, it always lasts about an hour. So given we had about a 10-minute preamble where we all do introductions and everything, I think this one will probably last just about an hour. An interesting observation for us planning geeks. So first of all, I'd just like to thank Councillor Eleanor Thompson for referring to this panel so that her constituents could see this deliberations in this detail, and to add that extra layer of transparency to the planning process. That's all to the good. Some of the contributions this afternoon would perhaps have led any observers to think the school was proposing to build the Black Gates of Mordor rather than a standard 2.5 metre green painted fence. And I don't genuinely think it will massively affect the climate emergency or the hydrographical conditions of that field. And I often say, Chair, that plan decisions are often absolute yes and absolutely no, and there's a point in the middle where you cross over. I do have to say though, Chair, when you read section 9 of the report that looks at what the issues that the school's facing, and indeed their justification for wanting this fence, this is possibly one of the most open and shut planning applications I've seen come before any of the panels I've sat on in the last couple of years. So for me, it's a hard yes to this planning application. Safeguarding's got to come first. Clearly, the school doesn't want to put the local community out. We saw that from the head and from the planning agent. Clearly, they don't want to do that, but they absolutely have to meet their safeguarding responsibilities. So, Chair, I'd like to move the recommendations.
Councillor, you'll second it. We haven't comment, but sorry. Yeah, the proposal. So where do we go from there?
Nikki, you're sorry.
No, that's fine. It's recorded that Councillor Walsher has made a motion for the officer recommendation to approve, which has been seconded. Chair, you may continue with and revisit the motion.
Councillor Giovanni.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to agree with Councillor Walshaw. This is fairly open and shut case, and the gates should be shut firmly on this. One of my main things around this is the littering and the dog fouling. If the gates are open, the littering and the dog fouling will just continue. And I don't want to see members of staff of a school having to go on a litter pick and poop a scoop before they can let the kids out onto the fields. And I'd most definitely do not want to see, and I hope nobody on this panel wants to see, a child pick up toxocariasis, which I believe can cause blindness. And none of us want to see that. In my rugby playing days, I was injured by glass on a pitch. I got a badly cut wrist because of it. So it happens. You sometimes can't see these things. We've heard mention of just replacing it with a hedge. Well, there has to be breaks in that to allow maintenance equipment in and out. So what do you do with those breaks? This has it maintains the footpath around. It has gates in it to allow that maintenance. It keeps the school safe. It keeps pupils safe. And as it says, there's pupils with SEND. And if anybody knows anything about children, especially if they're on the autistic spectrum or other social emotional behaviour issues, they can just take flight. And a hedge will not stop them. As Mr. Butler alluded, you know, people go through hedges and a kid will do that. So fully support the motion to go to the vote on this and accept.
Thank you. Councillor Simi.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think anybody's got a problem with the fence for safeguarding reasons, as I've already said. I would just like to make a comment regarding something that Nigel said at the beginning. He suggested that the letter from the ward members, Alderson and Wadsworth, was a late submission. It wasn't. It was just a further submission. If you read in paragraphs 3 and 4, they had already referred it to panel and made their comments. So I'd just like that to be put on record. It wasn't a late submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
And presumably we ought to thank them for referring it to panel because it's given us an entertaining afternoon, if nothing else. I think, Chair, this is a classic example of why you should go on site visits. And I appreciate not everybody can do that. And I think it's fair to say that when I looked at the papers, read through them, as you say, it's an open and shut case. Why would you even think about saying there's a safeguarding issue, but it doesn't matter? You know, none of us sitting around here, and we said it at the last meeting, are in the business of putting children at risk. and we'll do everything we can, everything we can to ensure that they're safe. And this is no exception. So if I'm honest with you, I was slightly surprised why it actually came to panel. But I appreciate there's some depth of feeling in the community. And I think it's also fair to say that when we were on site, and you look at the site itself, you would say to yourself, actually, is this the best solution? And that's the question I think we're asking, or we're trying to ask, is what they're proposing the best solution to do what they want to do? Now, had you been on site this morning, unfortunately you weren't, you would have seen what's actually on the ground. And so let's talk about, I think it's the west side where there's a wall and it goes onto Bradford Road. That height between the ground level, the school playing field level, and the wall, the top of the wall, is 2 meters, almost exactly the same as the fence they're going to put behind it. Now, effectively, that's a double wall. I don't know whether it's like the Black Gates of Mordor. I think they were only one thickness personally, but it's a bit more like the Berlin Wall in that there's two lines of defence. And I think ward member, the people who were on site this morning looked at that and said, actually, why? Why do you need to do this? Why do you need to create an extra fence? And then we're on about the hedge. And I think it's fair to say that had you been on site and seen the hedge, you wouldn't be talking about pushing through it, quite frankly, because you couldn't possibly do that. And I think it's fair to say that those of us on site thought to ourselves, actually, this hedge is currently forming a very effective barrier. Okay. Now, there are parts of that site, the north of the site, for example, where it's an open area, takes you out into effectively what I assume is more public green space. Without a doubt, that needs fencing, without a doubt. And certainly the area around the public footpath, I would say it needs fencing. You know, I do sympathise with the schools. As an ex-teacher, I've had to do it myself, having to go out onto the playing field and pick up dog mess. And I think it's important that we recognise that fact. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with the principle of securing these playing fields. I think the question I'm asking, and the reason I have some difficulty voting for this, is not because it's not because it's securing the site, but because I'm not sure this is the best way to secure that site. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
A couple of things. One is, when Mr. Butler sums up, can he confirm that the only 2 accesses for vehicular, sorry, there are 3 vehicular access, one off of the main road and through the wall, but the only other 2 are included in the area of fencing that everybody here agrees should be put in place. None of us have suggested that any fencing be removed from any side that has an access for mechanical vehicles or to enable anyone to access the site. So that the only way we're talking about here, if you just confirm that. And then the final one is the point that my colleagues made in their letter about access, and you read out the community access agreement that was there. Can we just put that in as a condition as well, that that's going to be the standard that's going to be adopted, the one that you read out, in terms of the community use, put that in as a condition so it's there at least to safeguard the uses of it.
There.
No, it's not. It's not in the. It's not in.
Oh, you mean so? You mean?
No, not in the conditions.
Yeah, but chair, just if you can just come back to this. I think there's only 2 accesses for cutting machinery and the kids. There's not 3. I think there's only 2. Okay. No, the community use agreement already exists and covers the playing fields. It doesn't need to be attached in any stretch of your imagination to this fence application. It exists at the playing fields that we're talking around as a community use agreement already in existence. It does not need to be conditioned. It would be, there's no need to condition it. And to be honest with you, I don't think it'd fit the 5 tests because we are talking about a fence.
So, right, just so you're clear on that, the school cannot alter that agreement under any circumstances.
This agreement was attached to the works that you saw on site today, which was the complete rebuild of the school.
Yeah, but can the school alter that agreement at some time in the future if they so determine for very good and genuine reasons, not, you know, that something occurs during, let's say something occurred during the weekend period when you say that community use can be, they may say, well, we don't want it used then. We might not want it used during school holiday. These things to safeguard, can it be changed?
I know.
And all I'm wanting to do is if it's put into the conditions, it then becomes a condition of the planning application.
Nick is going to.
Well, Chair, if I can just finish off.
Sorry.
No, they couldn't change it unilaterally. They would have to come back with a further submission if they should want to change it. Anything ultimately can be changed. But the simple matter of fact is that is already in existence that works with the reconstruction of the school, the rebuild of the school. Unilaterally, the school cannot change it. They would have to come back for further permissions through ourselves.
To the local ward members.
Well, they might consult with the local ward members, but the local ward members actually are not in the decision-making process, are they? It's actually through the variation to the planning agreement.
But can I just assist? Can I just assist? This agreement is already controlled legally through a condition that relates to a different consent, which has been implemented and can be enforced. The agreement specifically deals with variation by agreement, but with all the parties that are subject to signatory to that agreement. It cannot be done unilaterally and it must be done in writing. It cannot be assigned nor either. So there is some legal mechanism within that agreement to ensure that that's safeguarded, Councillor Anderson. It would be inappropriate and not meet the legal test to try and recondition it through a perimeter fence application. It's already covered through a legal condition. So you wouldn't duplicate that process.
Think it needed to be put in there because they're ward members, so they must be aware that there is a community use. They're going to be well informed locally. Why did they feel that there was the need to bring that to our attention in their letter?
Yeah, maybe they wasn't aware. I've forgotten. Councillor Anderson.
No,
Councillor Anderson, it's done clarified now. There's nothing more can be done. It's there, and it cannot change overnight or next year without coming back. So your ward colleague maybe forgot about it. We won't know. Nikki won't know. It's only them can answer that question. And you know how I am with others answering questions on the behalf of others. You don't know, and it's your colleague. So, Councillor
Reagan, the name is, yeah. The issue is with this community use agreement, because the playing fields have been left open for so long, there hasn't been a need to use the community agreement only for access to the school. Once this fence is erected, then they will have to use the community agreement to access outside. But that's not saying that you have to put that in the agreement because that's already there.
Chair, can I remind you that there is a motion that's been seconded as well on the table?
Councillor Anderson could go to page 31. Hopefully this will. Page 21, paragraph 31.
Just to assist you, Councillor Anderson, if I may. That relates to the discharge of the community use condition of the wider approval for the redevelopment of the site. So it just confirms that that condition's already been discharged.
I think you're still confused. You will get into it, Councillor Anderson. So before I go any further, Does any officers have anything to clarify before calling Steve? Sorry, a motion being called and we just keep going over and over the same thing. But, you know, so we just
Chair,
keep
can I
going.
propose an amendment to the motion?
Sorry?
Can I propose an amendment to the motion? Can I?
You vote first.
I'll ask the legal officer, can I?
Yes, you can.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Campbell, you can propose an amendment to the original motion. So as you wish, what the amendment is, if you could let members know.
Thank you. Can I propose, therefore, that we amend the motion to read something along the lines of panel accepts the need for the school's need to provide a secure environment, particularly around the playing fields, and accepts the school's need to produce some form of physical barrier, fence or otherwise, around those playing fields. Panel, however, believes that, in particular in relation to the, is it the northern boundary with the wall on? Sorry, help me out. Pardon? The western boundary, thank you. The western boundary and what presumably is this part of the southern boundary, there is a more appropriate treatment with regard to security, particularly in relation to improvements to the hedge line and recognising the wall on the western extent already provides a secure barrier.
I'm happy to say.
I'm going to have to give some legal advice now. The original motion has been amended on the points that Councillor Campbell has sought. Councillor Anderson has seconded that. Now it's referred to the original person that has moved the motion for approval as to whether you accept that or not as an amendment.
No, because I think it negates the purpose of the wall. The fencing for the school, I think it fails in safeguarding. As Councillor Bowden was probably about to suggest, I myself could vault that wall to get access to the school grounds. It's an insufficient barrier, Chair, is what we're saying. So I don't accept that as an amendment, no.
Okay, on that basis, then you can take a vote on the amendment that Councillor Campbell has made. If that falls, then you go back to the original motion. A vote on the amended motion that has been seconded by Councillor Anderson in the terms that he has made in relation to the wall and the perimeter fencing.
So we will now vote on Councillor Campbell. So all those in favour of Councillor Campbell amendment?
2, 3, 4.
All those against?
5. Okay.
So there's 4 that have voted in favour of the amendment, and there is 5 that have voted against, and that vote therefore fails and falls. So we go back to the original motion that's been seconded by Councillor Reagan, which can now be voted on.
Do you still want to say something?
The council also did say it, but in the sort of on the pictures that were displayed before, whilst the fence is kind of 2 meters in height from the playing field, going on Google Maps Street View, from the public side, it's the same height as a bin. And so it isn't just a safety, it's the same height as a bin is outside. It's not a meter high from the public. So it isn't just a safety feature there. The new fence isn't just a safety feature there for just purely children on flight risk. It's to prevent obviously it's there to prevent adults from going on the field.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, but let's go back to the motion. All those in favour of Councillor Walsh and Councillor Reagan, please raise your hands. And all those against? Oh, abstain? So that has been carried. So recommend. You now?
The application has been granted permission as per the original motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for coming. The next meeting will be on the 24th of November. Thank you.